Canon C300, not a Mark II.
No Mark II, just a straight up 300.
For the price, for the image, the type of films I make, I don't think I really need 4K yet. All parts considered, that's the camera I would use now if I were to start another feature.
Welcome to the Red, Green, Blue podcast.
So, welcome to the podcast. We're doing another My First Camera interview with Brad Barber. Brad Barber recently had a documentary, in fact, a couple of days ago, show on PBS about gun control, and it won the grand jury prize at South by Southwest and Audience Choice. So it's really exciting to be able to talk to him. We're going to talk about some of his first cameras he's had and other things. So what did you mentioned before the interview that you had a few first cameras, but let's just talk about them all. What's your very first camera?
And by the way, the documentary is not really about gun control.
Oh, whoops. I did the big no. It's not. It's about policing.
Yeah,
and guns
the
and
militarization of police. Yeah.
Yes, and it's very balanced. It's a really wonderful documentary. I think people with that subject is so controversial, they jump to conclusions one way or the other. But if you actually watch it, which you should, it's on Netflix, I believe.
It's on Hulu Plus. And iTunes, Amazon, anywhere you can imagine online. It broadcasts on PBS on Monday, but you can still watch it on VOD.
Is PBS streaming it as well on their website?
I think for like a week.
Okay.
Yeah, so by the time people listen to this, maybe not.
Yeah, well, check it out. It certainly is a fantastic documentary.
And I also directed that together with Scott Christopherson, I should say. It wasn't just me, as much as we'd all like to take credit alone, right? It's definitely a team effort between Scott
everything in film is a team effort. If anybody's saying otherwise, it's just,
that's true.
Unfortunately. Yeah, no, that's really great. No, of course. And he's a fantastic filmmaker as well. So what is your first camera and how did you get it?
I'm so excited to talk about this. I didn't really grow up wanting to be a filmmaker, but looking back, I saw some of the pieces kind of coming together. There's actually 3 cameras that were really important in my childhood. 2 of them were kind of first cameras, and one of them was kind of something else. My first still camera I got in high school.
He's got it actually here with you. You won't see this in the podcast, but on the YouTube channel, you'll see this.
I was always interested in journalism, and pretty early on in high school, I got onto my student, newspaper staff, and I really gravitated towards photojournalism. I loved the idea of telling stories with photographs, and so I got this Canon AE-1 that I still have. I haven't used it in a while, but I used this for years. I used it all through college. And just this is where I really started, learning more about photography. When I came to BYU, I joined the Daily Universe photo staff and got to take pictures with them. I got to learn how to roll my own film and develop my film and crop it and play with it on photo paper. It was just a huge blast. And I used this camera for a lot of that.
A Canon AE-1, which is actually one of the best-selling cameras of all time. It was the first one to have an automatic light meter, and people just went nuts for it.
Is that right?
There's a lot of those around. Yeah, my first camera was a Canon A1. Oh, cool. Which is just very similar in a lot of ways.
I remember getting it used too. I remember that. I went to a used camera store, and so it'd probably been out for a while. By the time I got it, would have been like the early 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure they'd been around for a while. My first video camera was called a Pixel 2000. Fisher-Price used to make these amazing toy cameras that shot video, it sort of collected video on audio tapes. So anyway, if you had an audio tape, you could use it. It captured this really interesting image, as the name kind of suggests, very pixely, black and white. It looked like, if I had to guess, maybe 12 frames, 16 frames a second or something. So like not quite, verisimilitude. And it was extremely user-friendly. So we would play with that as kids. I never used it to really like tell a story or make a film when I was a kid. But when I got to college and started becoming interested in documentary film, it was the late 90s, early 2000s, and these cameras were kind of coming back into vogue. There were some experimental filmmakers trying it out and using it, and I thought, I have one of those. When I was a kid, I had one, and so I asked my mom to send it to me from Tennessee out here to Utah, and she mailed it to me, and I played with it more in my film classes. I made a little pixel short film with me and my friends driving around. I was just really obsessed with that kind of lo-fi image that it created. It was a lot of fun. So that would have been my first video camera. And the other camera I'm holding here in my hands never belonged to me before, but it's a very important camera in my life. And it's called a Kodak Brownie Fun Saver movie camera. It's an 8mm, not Super 8. It looks like a little rectangle. And my parents, they got this as a wedding gift from my mom's sister, whose husband was working for Kodak at the time. And they shot all of our home movies on this. And growing up as a kid, that's definitely something I can point to that sort of was my first exposure to excitement for nonfiction filmmaking. It's all these beautiful 8mm home movies my parents recorded of our family, doing family things and seeing the light flares, in the middle of it where they had to crack it open and flip the little roll of 8mm film over and put it back in. And after the camera was retired many years later, and once I became a filmmaker and a film professor, my parents gave this camera to me just as a memento. So I keep it here in my office.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I think that's one common thread I'm noticing is that a lot of people are introduced to photography or film through their parents, whether they're just avid in documenting their own family, but they're around cameras a lot. And because of the financial constraints, that becomes their first camera, is their parents' camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love, by the way, the aperture setting on the front here. You can choose bright sun, on sand, or open shade. There's lots of very technical terms here for how to set the right
That's true.
aperture.
That's true. That's F8 is the answer to a lot of those technical terms you just heard there. But well, that's great. You also got is that a Fisher-Price Pixel camera there? That's a collector's item, I believe. It records to an audio tape. It's a very unique camera.
Yeah, that's it. It's plastic and it's got a viewfinder and a little aperture kind of dial on the front too, a little built-in microphone. And somehow it records onto these little audio tapes here. And then you plug it into the TV. And when I was in college, a friend of mine, JD Hacken, sort of helped me hack it in a way that you could output this to, I think we used Hi8 tapes or DV tapes at the time.
Really? You had external tape recorder that would work?
After I recorded it, then I'd record what was on the audio tape onto a videotape, and then I'd edit the videotape.
Oh, that's incredible. Those are really actually quite a bit of money on eBay now. I mean, they're hard to find.
Oh, yeah.
There's an effect you can't really replicate.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, as I think back to kind of get back to your question, those earliest kind of things I was trying with cameras, I came of age in a time when access to cameras was way different than it is now. To get a professional grade video camera was thousands of dollars, at least, more than I had access to. And so I had to find, like a lot of people, my generation, our generation, really DIY ways of trying to make films and videos. So whether it was with the Pixel camera, or I remember the first time I used a Super 8 camera when I was in college. Also, I shot everything on Super 8, but I recorded the audio on the microphone of kind of a crummy VHS camcorder, and then I, imported both of those. And I remember with one of my shorts, I had like 2 VCRs, set up, recording back and forth, destructive editing. So you just find ways to do it. And the challenge of doing that, of course, is sort of rewarding in and of itself. I don't want to wax too sentimental, but there was...
You're not going back, right? You're not...
Oh, no, not in a million years. No, yeah, that's exactly it. No, I would never go back. But I saw this documentary about the White Stripes called Under a Great White Northern Sky, Under Northern Sky something. It was really fantastic. It was on 16mm, and I heard the director talk about it on a podcast, actually. And he said that Jack White insisted that it be on 16mm because his philosophy, at least at the time, about art was that it had to be hard. You had to really struggle against something to make it. It shouldn't be too easy. And I think there's something to think about with that. Having said that, I love editing on my computer. I love the fact that you can shoot something that looks and sounds great on your iPhone. I think those are really cool developments. But I also believe, and of course I say this as a film professor, you need to learn some fundamentals first, and sometimes having to be a little more patient, having to wait for the film to be exposed. Or when you're exposing it in a tub in your bathroom, like Tim Irwin showed me how to do, and you have to go through this really long, difficult process in total pitch black darkness and wait for it to come out. There's this sort of birthing process that's extremely difficult, but rewarding, I guess, kind of like giving birth, right? There's something that I really value about that. When I was in graduate film school at USC, I was there at a time when they were phasing out all of their 16mm equipment. They even had a lot of flatbeds still in the early aughts. And they were phasing it out, and they had one section of this required class we had to take where you could still edit your 16mm film on a flatbed. It wasn't required. They said, if you want to have that experience, there's this one section where they're still editing on flatbeds, and I immediately signed up for it. I really wanted that experience of having to touch the film and, again, sort of struggle with it and get sort of a rite of passage experience. And I'm really glad I did. It was totally fascinating. And like we've been saying, it also very much reconverted me to the ease and quickness of editing, on a computer where you can experiment a lot more.
No, that's true. So how do you feel that influenced the way you make movies? Maybe even particularly in this documentary.
Whenever you're making a documentary, especially a feature-length documentary, time is this weird thing because on the one hand, when you're editing, you have a little more, I guess, flexibility than a feature film. I've read books about, for example, how Walter Murch edits or how any feature-length editor edits, and it's an incredibly structured, very intense process where they've got multiple people working on multiple machines, 18 hours a day. There's not a minute to lose. Every second is organized and accounted for, and you have to finish it in that amount of time. And something that I think is really exciting about documentary is, I'm speaking really generally here, but generally speaking, there's more opportunities to sit with an idea a little bit longer, to try out different things, and to not sort of feel as much intense pressure to just finish it and with whatever the footage gave you. Now, you have to temper that, of course, with the opposite problem of spending forever shooting something or editing something. But I think having those formative experiences where I could, number one, just shoot something, even if I didn't have the best equipment, served me for sure when I made my other films as a professional. And number two, being able to quickly try out different things. I started as an editor. When I finished grad school, I wanted a job that I could get paid for consistently, and editing seemed like sort of the most stable thing to do. I had a wife and a little kid, and so I tried to get editing jobs. And any filmmaker will tell you that's something really everyone, if you want to direct anything, you should really know a lot about editing. And it helped me to make, I think, a little bit quicker and more precise decisions when it came time to direct a feature or to direct the other films I made after that.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I think the plus of the digital era, as far as like creatively, is you can generate so much footage for free. Back in the day, 10 minutes of 35 millimeter film would cost like $1,000 by the time you bought the film, processed it, telesend it, made a print, anything like that, a minimum of 1,000. But now you can generate a lot of footage, but you do lose that discipline. And also I don't understand this, it's kind of counterintuitive, but there's always a fear in going out and making something. But you look at like the cameras like a Red Epic. That movie shoots like The Hobbit, films that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It's fantastic quality, but it's at a price point where you could almost shoot a wedding with it. But yet people feel this resistance that like they're still being held back by their equipment somehow. And I don't know if that's just the cop out, but really your iPhone is a better video camera than some of the best documentaries that were ever made were shot with. But still people just don't do it. In fact, to me, that's in documentary in particular. The whole Black Lives Matters movement and all that happened really because of people filming stuff in their own neighborhood with their own iPhone. And so it's like ghetto moms with an Android. And I think that's incredibly powerful that some of the best footage shot was really just with amateurs with their cell phone. Of course, your documentary touches on that, but it's more from the police perspective.
Well, we look at both perspectives for sure.
Yeah.
The film's called Peace Officer, and it's about a guy who used to be a sheriff back in the 70s. He started his state's first SWAT team. Then 30 years later, that same SWAT team killed his son-in-law in a controversial standoff. So the main character's name is Dub. He's an incredible character because he sees this complex issue with empathy on both sides. He still loves law enforcement. He's from a long line of cops and was very proud of the work he did as a sheriff. Even was proud of setting up the SWAT team. There were really good intentions. There's good reasons to use SWAT teams in certain scenarios. But he's also been affected as a victim of that kind of force. And he reaches out to other people that have sort of suffered as a result of SWAT teams being deployed maybe excessively and in dangerous ways. And so the film tries to look at both sides. And yeah, we definitely talk to current police officers, sheriffs about kind of what it's like to be on their side. And we talk to victims also. So.
Oh, yeah. No, and there's certainly a lot of, both sides have very good points and a lot of good things going on. And your documentary is almost a better way to explore the Ferguson situation than Ferguson in a way. Ferguson itself is, of course, very controversial. And you just bringing up the name makes people angry on one side or another. But in a way, I think kind of being like a similar situation with a person who's perspective on both, and it is a better way to look at it than something that's become so polarized.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does kind of separate the problem from the racial bias part of the problem. It has that particular part of the problem has been around for decades, and it's a big problem. I usually tell people a separate film, multiple films could and should be made just about that. In our case, we've just met this incredible character. My directing partner, Scott, actually is the one who first met Dub, and then he told me about him later. We were totally fascinated with Dub's personality and story, and we wanted to follow him and the people he interacted with in Utah, which just happens to be, I think, a 90% white state. The last census showed like 1.5% African-American. So the people that he met all were white. But then right as we finished shooting, we actually had started editing. The events in Ferguson unfolded. And we did go back and shoot one or two more interviews just to try to get a little bit of a recognition and context for how this issue has affected communities of color. But after a lot of the screenings, it's interesting, multiple times African-American people that have watched the film will come up to Scott and I and sort of thank us for showing this problem in a rural white town that reflects this larger issue that's at play, which is it's a systemic problem. In addition to the racial bias stuff that happens, it's even bigger than that. It's a systemic problem that's going to is affecting, and will continue to affect small towns, big urban areas, white neighborhoods, black neighborhoods. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. In my family, we have a significant amount of military and law enforcement and African Americans. I have a number of African American cousins. And there's a lot of good discussion and going on with this. And your documentary is certainly a part of that. What's the hardest thing about your job as a documentary filmmaker?
It's funny, we're sitting here in my office in the Harris Fine Arts Center at BYU, and this was actually the office of my old professor, April Shabrias, when I used to be a student at BYU. And roughly in the spot that you're sitting is where I was sitting when I was working for her, and she first sort of floated the idea of, well, why don't you be a film professor? Because I was telling her, I want to make documentaries, but I know it's very difficult to sustain a family with that kind of life. And she said, well, just do what I do. You can make documentaries and teach. And I thought about some of the biggest influences in my life, with films were people that did just that. Ross McElway, Alan Berliner, lots of people that I've met since then have kind of made that dual life work of being an independent filmmaker and being a full-time professor. And I think it has its own challenges. You can't just drop everything and go film somewhere for 6 months. You've got responsibilities for your students and other things at the university, with a little bit of time off in the summer where you are more free to kind of go wherever. That's how we shot Peace Officer. Scott was also a professor in Texas at the time, and we would shoot in the summer when we weren't teaching. But, I feel really lucky to have my job, because the type of person that can make a full-time freelance job work, like yourself and others, that's a very special skill set that I'm not sure I have, where you're constantly not just being a creative, but also being kind of a business person and making new opportunities happen and bringing in enough cash to keep things afloat. And of course, I like teaching. That's certainly a big part of it. So I guess I'm saying all that as a preface to say I think what I do is not nearly as hard as what a full-time freelance documentary filmmaker has to do. The hardest part of what I do, I guess you're probably asking as a filmmaker rather than as a professor, is raising money. I would say for sure it's easy. Fortunately, it's easy to grab a camera, grab a small DSLR or even an iPhone and film something that's unfolding. That's a huge blessing, because you don't always know what your next film's going to be. It might be something that just unfolds and you need to film part of it, and then maybe you edit together a little 5-minute something that then you start making your big proposals and treatments about, and you can kind of piece together what a larger story might be. So I'm really grateful for that. But still, once you get to that stage, just getting the finances, getting the organization that you need to make a feature film is incredibly difficult. And there's not a lot of state or federal funding for the arts. The handful of grants that are out there that are significant, both from government as well as nonprofits, are unbelievably competitive. Sundance has a documentary fund that you can apply for, and your chances of getting that fund are even less than they are of getting into the festival. It's just there's way more people trying to get that funding than there is funding. And then the other option is finding individuals or Kickstarter, and those kind of have their own challenges. So yeah, I think that I'd have to say that's one of them. Right now I'm thinking about my next film, and a big part of that is what can I film while I'm a professor and how can I pay for it? Well, I'm almost not as worried about being able to tell the story as I am about how to just sort of pay for it, if that makes sense.
What's a kind of a good budget for a documentary film nowadays?
Anywhere between mid six figures and 1 or 2 million.
Wow, that much, huh? I mean, that's like for a full-on like HBO kind of deal.
Yeah.
PBS.
Yeah. You might have a celebrity narrator or something, or a lot of worldwide travel or motion graphics, but
Morgan Freeman.
I mean, it's
$300,000.
smaller than an independent fiction film for sure, but
Yeah.
still, nothing to sneeze at. More than a few houses might cost for sure. Anyway, even at the low end.
What kind of camera are you guys going to be shooting that on?
The next film?
Yeah, next one.
If I were shooting tomorrow, I've done a lot of research about this recently. It might surprise you. The camera I would get tomorrow would be a C300, a Canon C300, not a Mark II.
No Mark II, just a straight up 300.
For the price, for the image, the type of films I make, I don't think I really need 4K yet.
Mhm.
And yeah, all parts considered, that's the camera I would use now if I were to start another feature.
Yeah, no, it's got good color, especially I don't know if it's a Mark. I don't know. You can, one of those two. I'm not clear on this. You can shoot at a lower resolution, but get more color depth. But yeah. So no, that's good. No, that camera's like really compact, can carry a lot of media in it. I think that's a great camera. I've been telling people that. I mean, shooting with a DSLR, makes a lot of sense, but having a purpose-built form camera for documentary, because you need to get to the controls quickly and things like that, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. We shot Peace Officer on 2 5D Mark IIIs. Scott and I always were directing together and shooting together. We both had a kind of an ideal camera rig. I'm sorry, identical. That's what I meant. It's ideal, maybe a stretch, but we had the same exact camera setup. And by the time we got to the end of that, I was just dying to have an XLR input where I could record sound onto the same card, where I had a built-in ND filter and I didn't have to physically, attach ND filters to the front. We tried a few ways around that, and it just, whatever the next film is, it's for sure going to be on a camera that was built for cinema and not a still camera that happens to also shoot some cinema, but that's not really sort of its main function. I still like the way it looks. I look at Peace Officer now and I'm still pleased with what a DSLR camera can look like even a few years ago when we shot it. But I would definitely go to a dedicated camcorder style camera now. Yeah.
Of course, once again, get a camera. It's all about getting out and shooting. So, DSLR is a fantastic camera. You look at documentaries made in the 80s and 90s, like what you have available with that is incredible. And it certainly could do a great job with it. There's no excuses not to make work anymore. So what do you like most about your job?
I love working with the students here at BYU. I have this kind of unusual position here where part of my teaching load is making documentaries for public television, for KBYU, or for the internet together with my students. That's been really fun, really rewarding. I've learned a lot from the students. And I think that's what most teachers in the arts enjoy, is actually, batting around ideas with students and even collaborating with students. It's been really cool. And it's complemented, my film work too. So that's probably my favorite thing about my current job, if you count both of those kind of worlds, the independent filmmaker world and the academic world, is they're always feeding off of each other. And to me, it's, completely ideal. I really like it. I love having an office, where I can do work. I never had that before. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years before teaching here. And when I first got here, they gave me the smallest office. I think it used to be a closet. And I was so thrilled just to have a place with a door and walls where I could have my stuff and concentrate. So I feel really lucky.
No, it's true. Me too. Like when I lived in New York, my apartment / office / bed was all in the same room. And I would kind of like work on my folding table and then like lay down on my futon. And when I got like 2,000 square feet, I was like, holy cow, I didn't know what to do with all this space.
Yeah.
When like my office now is like twice as big as my whole apartment I had in New York. And of course I have other rooms dedicated to other things, such as like TV and a fireplace room. I have a room just to have a fireplace. It's magic. So this is an odd question, but I kind of like it because I view there's a connection between plastic arts, where you make things, and performance arts. But if your work was a performance art, what performance art would it be?
Wow. That's an interesting question, especially for me, because I'm married to someone that does performance art as part of her practice.
Oh, literally like happenings art. Like,
yeah.
Yoko Ono kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is Susan Kruger Barber.
So that's very loosely defined. Yeah.
Yeah. And she does a lot of stuff with sort of city planning. She has an alter ego character that she'll sometimes dress up as, like a superhero that uses art and takes over city blocks to show how you could have, more pedestrian friendly or cyclist friendly ways of doing things. And, to be honest, I don't know enough about performance art. Susan has introduced me to a lot, and I'm getting better at sort of recognizing it when I see it. But I mean, the closest thing I could say, I guess, is documentary itself, is part the people that are sharing their lives and perspectives with you, they're sort of performing. That's, in a way, you're sort of making art out of real life, and that's the closest thing I can say. It's not manufactured. Of course, I'm trying to tell a story about the real life. It's different than journalism. It's different than, just flipping on a recorder and not doing anything, right? You still have a brain and a soul.
But can you think of like a particular one? I mean, you can be like ballet, it can be like soccer. I don't know. It can be anything. I mean, to me, documentary in general is a very slow, deliberate process. To me, it's kind of like a marathon, more so than other mediums. Like if in fiction film, you have like these 3 or 4 weeks where it's just super intense. Yeah. You're just like fighting for every minute. But documentary is kind of like you just got to keep going. And it's like over the course of 2 years, but like between pre-post and the shoot goes forever. And the post-production lasts forever. And you just keep on plugging away at it. But it's really like almost impossible to sprint finish a documentary. I mean, you just couldn't do it in the same way.
I guess you use writing throughout the entire thing. You're constantly writing when you're conceptualizing. You're writing as you film because you're deciding what to film and what not to film. And then, of course, as you edit, that's sort of you're writing it again. You can create new meaning out of the different images by the way that you juxtapose them and order them. And ultimately, that's when you kind of decide what the film is about. Scott and I didn't know our film was going to be about the militarization of police really until way into the shoot, probably after we started editing with our editor, Rennie McCauley. So, yeah, I mean, that's maybe the closest practice I can think of. And then, the people that we film, there's, like I said, there's kind of I'm not sure it's performance art necessarily, but even people relating things that are happening, or if they're letting you film events that are happening in real time, there's still a performance aspect to it. Fred Wiseman would say, nobody's that good of an actor. You can never completely perform in front of the cameras. If the cameras are there long enough, you get worn down and you forget that you're being filmed. I think there's probably truth to that too, but at least for the, a significant portion of when we filmed, I would guess that people are aware that they're being filmed, especially in 2016 when reality TV has been around for a decade and a half. And the internet and the way we present ourselves on social media is such a big, prevalent part of our society. Everyone knows what it's like to be filmed. You are aware of what it means when someone's filming you, where that could end up online. And I think it takes quite a while before you sort of cut through that. So there's always going to be some performative aspect to documentary filmmaking, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's really true. I mean, to me, like reality TV, one thing I noticed when reality TV came around and became very prevalent, when you start filming people, it would take them a couple hours before they realized they weren't on Survivor. Whereas before, it'd be like 10 minutes. It took longer, but at the same time, documentary, you're at the mercy of the editor. And so no matter how you feel you're controlling your image, you're actually really not. I mean,
giving it up.
You're giving it up. You have to, at one point, you drop it. I mean, some people, in fact, this is a funny story. I thought it would be fun to get like a photograph of a major football team's mascot kind of out of character. And so he's just messing around. It's like after a game, I was shooting it for some assignment. And I have very little interest in shooting sports, but I really like people and kind of sociology. But I watched him like through the camera for like half an hour waiting for him to drop character, and he never did. Wow. So that was a situation. But of course, he was performing. That's the difference. Actually, politicians, I've noticed, like keep up a persona a lot longer. I mean, because they're used to performing, and actors too. When I'm shooting actors up at Sundance, they're much more aware of what they're doing. What do you feel is like, well, I guess you kind of answered that question, but what do you feel is most important in your work? The pre-production, the shoot, or the post-production?
I mean, they all have the unique challenges. I'm in pre-production right now on my next project, and building a relationship with your subject is really difficult. And as I said, Scott's really the one that made the first contact. Well, Dub made the first contact with Scott, and Scott built a relationship with him before he talked to me. And it's really tough. Even with someone like Dub, who lived close to us, had sort of a lot in common with us living in Utah and the like. But I'm amazed when I meet documentary filmmakers that have sort of forged a relationship with someone that's in a very different sort of life circumstance as them, or in a different part of the world as them. So I think creating a genuine relationship with someone that works when you're filming, and you kind of are able to still keep enough of a distance to where you're not, tainted by that relationship. There's got to be some amount of trust, but you also have to be independent enough to tell your story you're going to tell about their lives. Any documentary film is just the filmmaker's story about what happened. Pre-production, production, post. I think building the relationship is definitely the hardest part of pre-production. Production's actually not that hard. I mean, once you can figure out what you're filming, after a little bit of practice, you kind of pick up on things that, to look out for when you're shooting, things to avoid, or sort of best practices, how to make sure you get enough coverage and cutaways and establishing shots to make sense out of something once you film it. It's probably physically the most demanding out of anything. That's probably the hardest part about post to me, is it does take a sort of a toll on your body, especially if you're filming verite style. And there's tons of variables. If you're filming in a war zone or something, that there's like a whole nother level of challenge. And then post-production, I think, is getting back to money a little bit. To work with a really great editor, it's really expensive. Their time is extremely valuable. So you've got to be really clear on what you want, or be lucky enough to know somebody that's incredibly talented, but flexible sort of enough to work with you on when you can pay them, or what they're sort of willing to do on the clock and not. In our case, we were self-financing so much. We had so little money. Almost everybody we worked with, we were really fortunate to meet incredibly talented people that were willing to be flexible because they believed in, the story.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like with my documentary, Sundance Skippy, I found editing was the grind.
You edited that yourself, didn't you?
I edited that myself. Yeah, I remember one point, I spent basically a solid month and a half editing it. And it was during the summer. And I was talking to a friend, and he said, you're so white. I can see your veins. Because I was just in my basement. I still kind of get feelings of anxiety thinking of editing.
Really?
It's funny because I don't know, you're supposed to edit in a dark room. And I know, at least that's what I did when I edited that. So you can see the monitors better and stuff. A darkish room. So I edited it in the basement. But now I have my office with windows all around and up, and I just need the sunlight coming in to spend all those hours. But I don't know if that's a thing. Is that a thing? You're supposed to edit it in a dark room?
I've heard that too. That's what's kind of helped me feel okay about having my office in the HVAC with no windows. I've always said, well, it's okay because I'm editing all the time. I think there's truth to the idea that you need sunlight as a human,
Yeah, that's true. I think
yourself.
Part of it is you can keep the monitor turned down at a lower intensity so you can look at it longer. So you're not looking straight at such a straight, bright light. It doesn't have to compete with the sun. But I found that doesn't work for me. I need to have lots of windows, a good open space, because I want to be comfortable there. So editing in a small closet in a dark room, it's not a lot of fun. But yeah, no, Sundance Skippy certainly was a good experience. It's nice. So how many editors did you edit footage on this? How many people edited it?
No, this is the first thing I've ever done where I didn't edit any of it. And that was a real challenge for me at first. I really wanted to get in there and get my hands on it. And our editor, Rennie, was based out of Austin. So, that never happened. I went out there for 1 week together with one of my students to just sort of assist. We would, find footage and build little selects for him. But I never really, we'd send a lot of cuts back and forth with notes. To be honest, and Rennie is amazing. Rennie is one of the best editors I've ever worked with. We're very fortunate to work with him. And I'd love to work with him again. But whatever I do next, I want to make sure it's on a platform where we can easily, let each other edit individual sequences back and forth rather than having to export things and wait for the cuts to go back and forth. I'm not sure, as a professor, it would be pretty tough to have time to edit something solo again. I'll edit my shorts, as much as I want. But for a feature, that's as you were just saying.
It's a huge time commitment. It really takes over your whole life.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's more even a psychological thing. This, right? It's it takes so you have to hold the movie in your head.
Yeah.
And so you can't really work on other things. Right?
Yeah.
So you'll lose the puzzle in your head.
It's a big puzzle.
It's a huge puzzle.
Yeah.
It's like doing a 10,000 piece puzzle, basically.
Yeah, and you can't take too long of a break either. If you take a week off, if you're late enough in the cut, that might help to sort of clear your mind a little bit. But for the most part, you'll start forgetting stuff if you're not always working on it.
Yeah. Now with your students, you have a unique perspective because you are a teacher and a filmmaker. What do you find they most struggle with, like when they're starting to make movies?
Well, in general, so I teach a intro to production class here too, where we do fiction and nonfiction. I think in general, just the stage of life that they're at, they haven't had a ton of life experience yet. They're 19, 20, 21 years old. So when they write scripts, certainly they're limited to the experiences they've had as an 18, 19, 20-year-old, and sometimes those only go so far. In documentary, they sort of have the opportunity to look a little bit more outside themselves. And some students really are able to do that and thrive here. It's been really cool to see them do that. There's a series I do for KBOU called Beehive Stories, where we go around the state of Utah and we do one short documentary about a person in every county, sort of talking about how they connect to the state of Utah, what they feel makes them a Utahn. We've been doing it for 7 years. It's been really, really exciting. We just finished the last county out of all 29 counties. We're going to do one more national park. But when we were first starting out, one of my students wanted to do a film about the smallest town in Utah. She wanted to talk to the mayor of the smallest town, see what it was like to be the mayor of a small town. And she went down there with her student partner and really just ingratiated herself with this guy who ran this tiny town basically as a second job. He had to be a farmer for his regular job. Then he was mayor sort of in his spare time. I don't think he got paid anything for it. And they just formed a really good relationship. When she first arrived down there, somehow he didn't understand she was going to film him. I think he thought she was just going to interview him, on a recorder or something and do a paper or something. And she was nice, but she said, I drove all the way down here. I've got my camera, let's do this. And he eventually really warmed up to her and sort of drove her around the town of Fayette, Utah, introducing her to everyone he knew, invited her to come to the town Christmas party. And I saw that happen a lot in Beehive Stories. I'd see students kind of get outside their comfort zone a little bit and make real relationships with older people with very different backgrounds than them, different viewpoints than them. And that's, the gift of documentary film. It lets you connect with, try to understand people that are different than you.
Yeah, no, it gives people a reason to go up and talk to somebody they wouldn't normally. That's one thing I love about my job is I talk to all sorts of people, and it's just a wonderful perspective on life, like people who I'd never meet in a normal sphere. And also with students, I've noticed that, with documentary still photography, it's a real, that's why you see a lot of pictures of children and of landscapes, because those two subjects never get crossed with you. They never really have an issue with you photographing them. But to go up to a 50-year-old man and say, I want to take your photo is a very scary thing for a lot of people. And, having that talk, no, you can't just take pictures of back people's heads. You got to go up and talk to them, explain what you're doing. And it's really a constant negotiation, a constant kind of selling yourself. And I've had situations where people, after a while, they're saying you've been here for a couple hours, could you give us a break? I'm like, yeah, sure. I just go off and photograph some other people and then, come back and say, how are things going? Oh yeah, sure. Come back. It's you're always ingratiating yourself to your subjects. And I think people who work in documentary, I've noticed, even if they work at a very high level, like Mary Ellen Mark, who wrote the foreword to my last book, who's as big a photographer as has ever existed. She's huge, 16 books, every major award. Being with her, she was so interested in people. It's kind of like being interviewed, just hanging out with her. And that's something I haven't necessarily seen in other genres, such as fashion or advertising photography. But yeah, no, I think that's just a wonderful blessing. In fact, I have a project I'm finishing up. In fact, I'm showing part of it in the St. George Art Museum. It's kind of on people in nature in rural America, kind of.
Cool.
And I don't want to finish it because I just like shooting it so much. It's just so much fun to go out and talk to these people from Duncan, Oklahoma, and spend the evening with them. I just love it. I love every minute of it. So I think I'm done with it, but I think I'll keep shooting it just because it's such a fun project to work on.
Cool.
So, well, that's great. It was really good talking to Brad. And again, check out his documentary on Hulu Plus and a number of other streaming. So thanks a lot for listening and tune into our next episode.